Welcome, everyone. My name is Sam Gedeborg, Brother Sam Gedeborg. I am an online instructor for BYU Idaho. And I grew up in the Twin Falls area, just kind of a small little town called Shoshone. If you blinked while you drive through it, you would miss it. So, but that's where I grew up. And then I went to college to Boise State University, where I got my degree in secondary education, teaching math, and then got my master's degree in education technology. And so now I work at Utah Valley University, and I'm currently working on my doctorate, which is why I won't be able to come to the conference. I wish I could be there and enjoy the atmosphere with each of you, but I'll be watching the recordings and stuff online and doing that later. So, but I'm grateful to be here and to be presenting to you. And I just have to mention to you up the front, I'm so stressed out to be here right now. And actually, I'm really grateful for that stress. You know, presenting here to you, I pray that our time will be very valuable and that you'll be aided by the Spirit and testified in ways which we realize the mission of BYU Idaho and inspire ourselves. Just recall that the mission of BYU Idaho is to build testimonies of the restored gospel of Jesus Christ and encourage living its principles, providing a quality education for students of diverse interests and abilities, prepare students for lifelong learning, for employment, and for their roles as citizens and parents, and to maintain a wholesome academic, cultural, social, and spiritual environment. It's interesting that in March 20th of 1839, Joseph Smith wrote a letter from Liberty Jail, where he had just spent the previous 4 winter months living through extreme and difficult conditions. Pressure and stress that would have made even the strongest of men question their resolve were laid upon him. It was during this difficult and trying time that he lifted up in prayer to God, saying, "O God, where art thou? And where is the pavilion that covereth thy hiding place? How long shall thy hand be stayed, and thine eye, yea, thy pure eye, behold from the eternal heavens the wrongs of thy people and of thy servants, and thine ear be penetrated with their cries?" The Lord's answer to this topic that Joseph brought up is my discussion for today. And he said, "My son, peace be unto thy soul. Thine adversity and thine afflictions shall be but for a small moment. And then if thou endure it well, God will exalt thee on high. Thou shalt triumph over all thy foes." Online education is definitely not an easy task to undertake, and it can be very stressful. There will be trying times, difficult circumstances, and many challenges that our students will have to go through to improve their lives for this promising future that education does provide. The church encourages us to obtain as much education as possible. In fact, gaining an education can be much more than a commandment. It can also be considered a calling, if you will. For example, in my patriarchal blessing, I received some inspiring counsel from the Lord for the time when I would be called upon to attend college. However, I repeat, education is not an easy task, and it can be very stressful. And dare I venture to say that this adventure of education can even be more stressful for our non-traditional student population, those who are attracted to BYU Idaho's online and pathway programs for the flexibility and the opportunities that are offered to them from that. Notice that Heavenly Father does not remove a stressful situation in our lives. Instead, he uses those stressful situations to build and to inspire us. President Clark Gilbert, during the keynote address yesterday, encouraged us by saying, "We are not in the business of delivering curriculum. We are in the business of changing lives." Helping our students know how and learn to navigate through stressful situations can be part of our duties and responsibilities as we strive to create and navigate the students through these stressful conditions that we call higher education. The benefits of stress are enormous. The first one I would like to talk about is how stress creates growth. Engineers will tell you that without stress, it is impossible to build and construct buildings, bridges, or any other structure for that matter. Stress is also necessary for the growth of our muscles. As a track coach, I would work many long hours putting stress upon my athletes' muscles. This intentional exercise would break the muscles apart so that the body could then begin the healing process of putting the fibers and reconnecting them to make the muscles even stronger than they were before. Our lives are constantly filled with challenges, with difficulties, but this is intentionally designed with a divine purpose. The Lord has said, "My people must be tried in all things, that they may be prepared to receive the glory that I have for them, yea, even the glory of Zion." Trials are needful in this refiner's fire that we call life, and the stress that we feel is a natural reaction that should be both welcomed and accepted as preparing our bodies for the difficulties we will soon face. Which leads me to the second point. The perception of stress may be correlated with longevity and a healthy lifestyle. At the University of Wisconsin-Madison, researchers asked almost 29,000 people to rate their level of stress over the past year and whether they believed the stress was good or bad for them. They then looked at the levels of stress and who believed the stress had a large negative impact on them, and the results were enormous. 43% of those who said that they had high stress levels and believed that stress would have a large negative impact were more likely to die. So they looked at the death records and said, okay, so these people who think that stress is negative and will have a large negative impact on my life are going to have more likelihood of passing away. On the other hand, those that experienced a lot of stress but did not perceive its effects poorly were amongst the least likely to die when compared to other participants in the study. So what does this tell us? Well, first off, a negative perception towards stress can actually cause you more good than harm. Kelly McGonigal referred to this research in a 2013 TED Talk in discussing the benefits of stress. And in an effort to make stress more of our friend, she introduced a practice that was designed to induce stress. And so I want to go through that with you right now. So what I want you to do is this. I want you to start counting down. Start with 996 and then subtract 7 each time. So it'll be 996, 989, 982. And so I want you to start that process. Keep it going. Have you started yet? You're not going fast enough. Go quicker. You need to be going faster, okay? In increments of 7. Is that the best you can do, really? Okay. So we'll stop that practice now. But what I want you to think about is if you participated in that, didn't you feel some sweat? Maybe your heartbeat increased a little bit. Maybe there's some shakiness, nervousness. Wow, that sounds a lot like giving a presentation at a conference. But the point is that your body is preparing you to meet the challenges that are coming up, the trials, if you will, that you're experiencing. This heightened sense and awareness to improve performance is actually a blessing and not a curse. Now, one thing I want to point out from this challenge is the negative vibe which can rub off on the participants of the study. Think about it to this question. When I said, is this the best you can do? Wasn't that a little bit of a negative thought that might have popped in? For those who take the challenge with a positive attitude, the perception of stress can actually be very welcoming. It can be a friend, if you will, as Kelly McGonigal suggests. Participants who struggle with a negative attitude or approach or perception will actually be causing more damage than good. A Harvard study once showed that participants who had a positive outlook on stress had different blood vessel constriction than those who had a negative effect. So what should happen is your blood vessels should be really big and large to allow the blood flow. And once stress happens, those who had a negative approach, those blood vessels would actually contract, which would create blood pressure, higher blood pressure, and more health risks. But same people who would go through a stressful situation, but with a positive outlook, their blood vessels remained open and didn't constrict like those with the negative view. So by having that positive perception, you can actually keep, even though you can't control the stressful situation, you can actually keep the blood flowing in the way it should. Negativity can have a sore point that escalates and could create even more and more problems down the road and make the stressful situation even worse than it was before. In April of 2015, in a general conference session, Elder David A. Bednar said, "Unlike worldly fear that creates alarm and anxiety, godly fear is a source of peace, of assurance, and confidence." How do we fear our stress? Is our confidence placed properly in the Lord, or is it placed in our own abilities, in our own confidence? The Lord has said to us, "I give unto men weakness, that they may be humble, and my grace is sufficient for all men that humble themselves before me. For if they humble themselves before me and have faith in me, then will I make weak things become strong unto them." Helping our students control that perception of stressful situations, which will come, will allow a small bit of that negativity from churning worse and taking that good stressful situation into a chronic illness. Our job as instructors can be very similar, if you will, to a stress engineer in finding the small areas of negativity and fear and intervene before it gets out of hand. In June 5th of 1976, the Teton Dam burst in Idaho and would later be considered as one of the greatest architecture failures of all time. At 7:30 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, a muddy leak appeared on the side of the dam, suggesting that there was sediment in the water. But engineers did not believe that this would be a problem, and by 9:30, the downstream face of the dam had developed into a wet spot which began to discharge water. The embankment material began to wash out. Bulldozers were brought in to plug the leak, but were unsuccessful, and at 11:15, word was sent to evacuate the residents downstream. By 11:15, the crest of the dam sagged and collapsed into the reservoir, and 2 minutes later, the right side disintegrated and over 2 million cubic feet per second of water rushed through the dam. By 8 p.m., the reservoir had completely emptied, even though 2/3 of the dam still remained. Recognize that this talk isn't about avoiding dams or the stress that we put on dams or to avoid our own stress in life, as the benefits are needed and are required. Much like a dam provides so many wonderful benefits to our lives, so does also stress. But there are two important pieces of this information I do want to convey to you. First, the construction of the dam. It was a deliberate procedure that must be analyzed for every single site. When a dam is constructed, they look at the situation, the location, and all the other aspects that would be considered for the dam on that situation. Our own stressful conditions are different as well for each one of us. Something that may add stress to one person may not to another. We all have our own difficulties and trials. Sadly, the Teton Dam was constructed even though some geologists expressed concern with a location or materials. Further analysis might have prevented this tragedy from even occurring in the first place. And likewise, let's keep in mind that stressful situations can have a differing effect upon our students. The second point I want to make with this is that dams have spillways designed to release water so as to not damage or destroy a dam. As instructors, we can be the spillways for the stresses of life in an online environment for our students. And it will be different for each student and each situation. Going back to the muscle analogy, while prevention methods were always preferred, sometimes healing must take place when a situation was too stressful and exerted too much force and created a rip or a tear in one of my students. In paraphrasing Henry B. Eyring, President Clark said at the keynote yesterday, "At the essence of this university is the investment in the life of a student, individually by a faculty member. When the students who are taking online courses feel the love of a faculty member, they'll feel the love of the Lord. And when they feel the love of the Lord, they will want to improve themselves. And when that happens, they will become great students." Notice the key there is focusing on the love of the faculty for the students. It's a one-on-one love and appreciation that must be extended out to each of the students. Sometimes that's the healing that takes place as we reach out to the students and let them know of our appreciation and heartfelt concern for the stresses that they are receiving in their lives. Improvement comes through stressful situations by showing that love and appreciation. However, by looking for negativity, fear, and discouragement, it is helpful as instructors to find ways to help our students that are having those thoughts and feelings and encourage them to have a healthy stress and understanding of this. Recall in the land of Helam, Alma's people were frightened by an advancing Lamanite army. I know there are many of my students who are sometimes frightened by an advancing finals exam. But Alma went forth, stood among them, and exhorted them that they should not be frightened, but should remember that the Lord their God, and he would deliver them. Therefore, they hushed their fears. We should strive to change the perceptions of our students, how they look at stressful situations, as a stressful situation is just their body preparing them for the growth that they're about to receive. In my teaching group, one instructor mentioned that they had started putting quotes inside learning reports that students were filling out weekly. I personally loved this idea and started implementing it into my course as well, and choosing a motivational quote or an idea or learning and try to create positive attitudes towards the stress my students might be feeling. One week, I put the following quote from Dieter F. Uchtdorf inside the learning report in my feedback. "So often we become so focused on the finish line that we fail to enjoy the journey." I would like now to read one of the responses that the students sent back to me on their next week's learning report. "First, I'd like to thank you for the quote that you gave me in my feedback last week. I definitely need to start finding the joy in the journey. I have a new baby, just 2 months old, and I have felt kind of rushed through my work here in school. And honestly, I'm just really quite tired. But this week, I made the commitment to be more dedicated, and it was interesting how I felt so much less stress and actually had fun doing my work. Well, this week, I want to continue with that goal from last week by not rushing through the work and trying to learn the principles and not just the problems of math." Close quote. I'd wager that she did not feel less stress, but rather had a change of the perception towards the stress that she was feeling. Her fears were hushed. The Spirit spoke to her, even though I had no idea who this quote would touch or which student this encouragement was desperately needed with. Relieving stress should not be our goal, if you will. We're not trying to reduce the workload or change the assignments. We don't have to remove the amount of stress that the students would be feeling, but rather we should help them perceive it upon which their fears are viewing it. I'd like to close by reading a portion of the Lord's reply to Joseph Smith in Liberty Jail. But in doing so, I'd like to challenge you with a few words to make it a little bit more applicable to our situation. So the words that I'll change, just listen to it as I go through it. And if thou should be cast into an online class or into the hands of a teacher, and the sentence of lead student be passed upon thee, if thou shalt be cast into an unsupportive group, or the billowing homework conspire against thee, if computers become thine enemy, if your laptop screen gathers darkness, and all the emails combine to hedge up the way, and above all, if the very jaws of hell shall gape open the mouth wide after thee, know thou, my son, that all these things shall give thee experience, and shall be for thy own good. The Son of Man hath descended below them all. Art thou greater than he? I want to testify to each one of you that he who clothes the lilies of the field knows you and I, knows our students and their needs and their trials and their stresses and their difficulties and their challenges. And with so great knowledge and power of knowing that he exists and cares for us, what have we to fear? Certainly not those trials or those challenges, and certainly not the stress. I testify with Nephi, who, when going through a stressful time in his life after Lehi passed away, devotedly declared, I know in whom I have trusted. And I want to share this with you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.